Is there a clicker? Oh, perfect. Okay, well, good morning. Hello, good morning. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and of course, I'm very grateful to Deepali for extending the invitation. I've been given an exceedingly short time to basically help set up the panel on a very important topic, which is how do you make alliances work, particularly in the context of climate, but any other difficult, intractable problem. But let me explain that my remarks are going to be based on experience over the last 5 years, helping build and lead three significant alliances. The first one is GAP, the Global Energy Alliance, which has been incubated by Rockefeller Foundation, but also supported financially by Bezos Earth Fund and IKEA Foundation. And here what we're trying to do is intervene in a set of low and middle income countries and accelerate their transition towards renewable energy. And we have big goals, ambitious goals on carbon access and jobs. The second alliance is, you've already heard from Mansa yesterday, is UNICEF Generation Unlimited. In India it's called YUVA. But this was incubated and continues to be housed within UNICEF, but as a very unique and unusual partnership. So we have a number of private sector companies, including Unilever, SAP, Microsoft, Accenture, all as founding partners. And we have foundations like IKEA Foundation and Dubai Cares, etc. And our goal in this was somehow to engage 1.8 billion young people all across the world and find a way to give them the mindsets and skill sets they need for a world that is changing so dramatically. And I just stepped off that board in last week, and they presented the first formal impact evaluation. And it looks like over these 5 years, we have engaged about 250 million people across 84 countries, which is quite a significant achievement, which wouldn't have been possible by any single organization, but as an alliance, you get there. And the third one is called the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship. Although it says global, it's largely in India right now. And what we're trying to do here is to create a vibrant entrepreneurial hub in every district in the country, thereby creating a big entrepreneurial movement with millions of entrepreneurs and tens of millions of jobs created. So everything I say is going to be based on my experience with these three. Quickly, when do you need an alliance? Because if you actually do a search for Alliance 4 on Google, you're going to get several hundred hits because there's so many alliances. And it's not altogether clear whether every problem needs an alliance. So there are two criteria particularly for deciding when you need one. First is you're solving a really wicked problem. And a wicked problem is one which is at the intersection, as you know, of multiple systems. So poverty or health or climate all fall in there. And the second criterion that is necessary is there must be real synergies in coming together. Okay, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. When the organizations come together, they share resources, expertise, policy heft, etc. They're able to accomplish more than they could individually. Globally, as you know, the Gavi is usually held up as a really successful alliance. I actually think in India, the most successful alliance we have is NASSCOM. It's called an industry association, but it's truly a very, very effective alliance. Now, what does it really mean to be an alliance? Because this, again, as I said, there's so many of these which are alliance in name only. So what I have learned is that three things are essential. First is the members of this, the core members of this, have to be committed, and there has to be a high degree of trust, and there has to be a high degree of mutual goodwill. If this doesn't happen, then you really don't have an alliance yet. And how do you get there? You get there because there is a genuine belief, at least amongst a small set or the core actors, that we can achieve more by coming together. And therefore, there is this willingness to put aside our individual identity for a moment and come together around shared goals, and therefore joint planning to achieve those goals, joint decision making, and so on. And this is easier said than done, as many of you would have experienced. Now, there are just two concepts I want to talk about today, which are just enormously, enormously important in making alliances work. And I wish I had learned these much sooner than I actually did. And the first one is one that all of us are now familiar with, which is the notion of tipping points in a system. So one of the earlier quotes I'd put up was by a fantastic quality guru from the 60s. And he said, every system is perfectly designed to produce the outcomes it does. So if you don't like the outcomes, you have to go back and change the system, okay? So whether it's bad health outcomes, bad climate outcomes, whatever it is the result of intentional and unintentional choices we have made in the systems that produce those outcomes. And so if you're going to move the system, unfortunately, it's not easy because these systems tend to be very stable. It can be in bad stable equilibrium or good stable equilibrium, but they're stable. And so the typical programmatic things we often do in our sector don't really work. You nudge it, but it quickly comes back. That's why our programs are so rarely sustainable and don't really scale. So this is why the idea of these tipping points, and there's another term I heard for it called acupuncture points, are so important. And the people who really have done a good job evangelizing this are the climate scientists. So recently I heard Johan Rockström talk about climate change tipping points. And a good example he gave was the Amazon forest, where if you deforest more than 20%, it basically degrades into savanna and quickly becomes a carbon emitter instead of a carbon sink. And Johan pointed out we're already at 18%. So we have to prevent it from hitting a bad tipping point. In our work, I've been pointing out similarly a few examples of tipping points. So in the Global Energy Alliance, it turns out grid-scale battery storage is really important. So as you increase the percentage of renewables beyond 20%, 25%, two things happen. First of all, the grid becomes unstable. And second thing that happens is, of course, you don't have power at night or when the wind doesn't blow. So you need these giant battery storage systems, energy storage systems. The problem is it costs 2-3 cents a kilowatt hour to generate power in India, for instance, but it costs 9 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour to store it. So it's completely uneconomical. So what is the tipping point breakthrough we need? We've got to dramatically bring down the cost of battery storage, and that's not going to happen just through technology and chemistry. It actually requires a lot of business model and regulatory innovation. And so what we're trying to do is assemble a team of stakeholders. By the way, that meeting is going on, convened by Rocky Mountain Institute right now, to try and break through on battery storage. In the UNICEF youth sort of example or context, what is a tipping point? Well, our hypothesis strongly is that if every young person in the world gets exposed to entrepreneurship, begins to see entrepreneurship as a legitimate and primary career choice rather than a job which may not exist, and is exposed to the skills required for that, wow, the world might change. So right now we've achieved a scale in India of this morning for 4 million kids across 10 states from grades 9 through 12 at this very moment are learning entrepreneurship by doing rather than teaching. So this is an example. If you don't get to these tipping points, you have what you usually see, which is a collection or portfolio of good programs, each of which may have good outcomes, but it fails to change the behavior of the system. So that's one thing. The second important concept I want to talk about is the notion of a backbone organization to support an alliance. You look at any successful, reasonably effective alliance, whether they call it that or not, there is an underlying, if highly effective secretariat or backbone, which is supporting it. Now, what I've learned painstakingly over 5 years is the backbone has to be designed and you have to build the capabilities very intentionally to do 5 or 6 things. The most important thing this backbone organization needs to do is number one, which is constantly look at the whole system and understand where are the tipping points, where do we need breakthroughs, and assemble the right set of actors, and it could be government, private sector, social sector, whatever, think tanks, to try and achieve that breakthrough, and I'd given earlier examples of how we're doing that. The second thing is money. At the end of the day, alliances are lubricated and glued together by money. And so the ability to raise significant capital, not just for your own organization, but for the alliance, is very, very crucial in making things work. And that's why in GAP, fortunately, we started out with 1.5 billion as a war chest, which we can use over the years to achieve our goals. Then the third critical piece is MEL. And the measurement evaluation has to drive the strategy, right? It's a loop. Now, it's hard enough to do MEL at the level of a complicated program. Imagine trying to do MEL for an alliance where each organization is doing its own thing. There are challenges of gathering data and so forth. But yet, it's incredibly important. I won't go on and on and on, but these are the 5 or 6 things you have to purposefully design a secretariat or a backbone organization to do. Pretty much the last slide. Look, the reason why there are so few really successful and impactful alliances is very simple. It's really hard, okay? And I talked about, again from personal experience, what makes it hard? By far and away, the number one thing that matters is leadership. It's true generically in life, but it's particularly true in alliances. And there are 3 qualities that we have to look for when we think about who's going to lead this alliance, who's going to lead this backbone organization. The first is you need an entrepreneur. Okay, whether they're an entrepreneur by profession or not, they need to have that entrepreneurial mindset. And the second thing is intensity. These are incredibly intractable problems, and so the biggest difference is the intensity of energy that we bring to it. The second is you need a systems thinker. There's too much tendency in all our work to jump into action, and that usually means a nice set of programs, each of which is good, but as I said, fails to achieve collective system change. And the third is this ability to inspire and put together these partnerships. There are many other things. I repeatedly point out the pitfall of number 2, temptation to build lots of programs, all sounding good, but achieving not much. An alliance that doesn't add enough value to the partners is hardly likely to last. Governance is something that's incredibly central. I've had an opportunity to refine governance first with GAME, then with UNICEF GenU. In GenU, we really got most things right in UNICEF, and then we finally replicated that in GAP, and I'm thrilled to say it's working brilliantly. So if any of you have questions on how do you do this, we're happy to share it through Rockefeller Foundation. This is just a glimpse of what we have achieved in GAP after 18 months. When I say we, it is the Alliance. And it's an eye test, but it really is quite incredible. And the point here is there is no way any single organization in 18 months could have achieved this. This is the power of the Alliance. So let me pause here, and my job was simply to set up the panel, and we have a brilliant set of panelists, so let me get out of the way. Over to you. Thanks.